Ebelstein was a city of cramped rooftops and winding alleys, and deep in its slums lived a shabby old man everyone called the boastful old man. He was only capable of using one-star magic, yet he strutted through the streets as if he stood above all others, lifting a hand to flash crude blue light while loudly declaring that he was an archmage. His temper was notoriously bad. Children barely needed to play a harmless prank before he would erupt in fury, shouting and raging the moment his patience snapped. Even so, Derrick learned magic from that old man. There was no grand destiny behind it. The old man wanted a follower to listen to him, and Derrick wanted knowledge. Night after night, beneath dark trees and beside a small fire, the old man would sit across from him, raising a finger as he lectured and hammered lessons into his head. The flames crackled between them as time passed quietly, seasons changing one by one. Bare branches and cold winds eventually gave way to fresh green leaves and warmer days, and watching slowly turned into practice. In a clearing, Derrick knelt and focused on steadying his breath. He pressed his hands against the ground as a faint blue aura gathered around his body. Sweat slid down his face as the flow inside him finally began to move the way the old man had described. The old man stared in disbelief, his eyes widening, and he says that Derrick has grasped the flow of mana before trailing off, as if what he was seeing made no sense to him. The pressure grew heavier. Derrick's vision sharpened, his red eyes reflecting the swirling blue surge as mana screamed at the edge of control. He forced it into shape, pushing it outward. Energy burst from his hands in a violent arc, becoming a blazing blue strike that ripped through the air. The light slammed into a nearby surface with a sharp impact, scattering sparks and dust as it carved in with overwhelming force. Behind him, the old man froze, utterly stunned by what he had just witnessed. And so, while doing endless chores for the old man and enduring his constant demands, Derrick continued training. In just 1 year, he became a one-star mage. At night, the old man would drink and speak as though the world had already decided everyone's limits. He says that beyond the northern walls of Ebelstein, noble children reach 3-star levels before their coming-of-age ceremonies. He says that someone lowborn like Derrick, with common blood, could train for an entire lifetime and still never reach that height. He warns him not to grow arrogant and insists that Derrick's pitiful talent would hit a wall at 2-star, forcing him to give up. The old man never tired of preaching about bloodlines. He says that magic is determined by blood, and he insists that effort means nothing in the face of it. Derrick listened quietly, chewing on plain bread as the same argument circled again and again, drawing an invisible wall between nobles and commoners. At times, Derrick wondered if the old man spoke that way because he himself carried regrets for things he could never achieve. That night felt especially long. The old man fell asleep near the dying fire, and Derrick remained awake behind him, staring into the darkness as the embers slowly faded. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, drumming over everything until the world turned cold and gray. When he returned the next day, the old man was dead. The body lay sprawled in the rain, covered in bruises from a brutal beating. Derrick stood over him as water soaked his hair and sleeves, assuming at first that the old man had picked a fight and been beaten somewhere. Later, he learned the truth. Guards had beaten him after catching him trying to steal a 2-star magic book from a warehouse. Derrick kept wondering why an old man who constantly spoke of limits and bloodlines would do such a thing. No one had an answer. The boastful old man had always drilled the idea of bloodlines into Derrick until it felt carved into his bones. Yet Derrick could never be of noble blood. That was because he was not even someone from this world. A blue window appeared and states that Derrick has mastered the basics of magic and must choose a primary magic school, warning that the decision cannot be changed. And so, 4 years passed. Katya Flameheart entered Derrick's life. She was the former mistress of the fallen Viscount Flameheart family, a noble by birth and a 3-star mage. Many mercenary groups sought her out. While staying in Ebelstein, she accepted work with the Beldern Mercenary Company and taught Derrick, who had joined as a young member using only 1-star magic. From Katya, Derrick learned many things a 3-star mage could teach. At Beldern's Tears Tavern, she says that it is natural for mages to harbor ambitions of rising higher, and she points out that Derrick has that sort of talent. She then warns him that excessive greed only slows progress. Derrick replies that he will keep her words in mind. Katya tells him to close his eyes and feel mana. She says that he should calmly sense where mana comes from, understand its flow, and then imagine what he wants to manifest through it. Derrick sits still as a thin blue aura forms around him, sweat gathering on his face as he concentrates. Watching him closely, Katya says that he clearly possesses a considerable amount of innate mana. She adds that perhaps due to his combat experience, his mana control is also unusually stable. The energy suddenly surges harder, flooding Derrick's senses until his eyes snap open under the pressure. Katya's expression tightens as she reacts to the abrupt shift. A violent sound crashes through the tavern, rattling the room. Mercenaries jump to their feet, shouting and demanding to know what just happened. Someone yells that it might be an attack and orders others to check outside. Derrick stares at his hands as faint vapor curls around them, then he looks up sharply and calls out for his master. Katya grips Derrick's wrist and orders him to stay silent and simply follow her. Outside the tavern, armed people in the street tense up, and one of them mutters that they definitely heard an explosion, then warns everyone to look carefully because it was unmistakably an explosion. Katya leads Derrick through the narrow alleyway toward the orange glow ahead, and Derrick calls for his master, uneasy. Katya turns back with a hard look and tells Derrick to listen carefully to what she is about to say. Derrick answers that he understands. Katya explains that nobles are extremely sensitive about their privileges, and she says that magic is the greatest privilege of all. She adds that innate power is treated like a blessing, but only when it belongs to nobles. She says that it is very rare for commoners to reach the 3-star level, and when it happens, it is usually because they devoted their entire lives to magic. Katya then points out what Derrick just used and states that it is a 2-star illusion spell called auditory hallucination. Derrick stays still, sweat beating as he absorbs her words. A notice flashes and Derrick's vision access to 2-star magic is unlocked. 2-star magic auditory hallucination is acquired. Derrick recalls that because of that moment, at age 14 he became a 2-star mage. Afterward, Katya keeps taking him along and teaches him various spells, and sometimes she also tells him stories about the high society she once moved through in her noble days. Time passes like that for a year, until Katya finally has to leave. The Count Elvester family had appointed Katya as a private tutor. The family stood under Margrave Elvester, a figure even the Grand Duke of the capital could not treat lightly, making the offer impossible to refuse. Becoming a magic instructor for a noble house of that standing was a tremendous opportunity. Before she left, Katya gave Derrick a 2-star magic book as a gift. A blue window appears and states that he has acquired a magic list. It records combat magic as mana arrow full power and manifestation fireball, conversion magic as light creation, illusion magic as sound barrier and auditory hallucination, summoning magic as guide fairy, and detection magic as direction sense. Derrick sits alone, the book resting in his hands, his head lowered as he continues studying and engraving its contents into his body. Another year passed, and Derrick taught himself 2 additional 2-star spells. At just 16, he tells himself that he has no intention of stopping at this point. Back at Beldurn's Tears Tavern, a broad-shouldered man leans over the counter toward him and says that they finally have a proper job after a long dry spell. Derrick asks what kind of job it is. The man grins and says that the request comes from none other than the Grand Duke Duplin family. Then he demands to know if Derrick understands what that means. Derrick repeats the name in disbelief and asks why such a family would approach them. The man snaps that this detail is what truly matters, then shouts that it is Duplain, the sort of family that spends gold like water. He says that if they establish a connection through this job, it could open many doors with them in the future. Derrick presses for more information and asks what the request actually involves. The man says that it is nothing special, only hunting down a few monsters near the outskirts of the Grand Duchy. Derrick asks if that is really all there is to it. The man insists that it is, adding that noble lords do not lie about such matters. Derrick frowns, rubs his chin and sighs that something feels off, questioning why a family as powerful as Duplain would rely on mercenaries to deal with monsters. Derrick stands and says that he will not take the job, telling the man to find someone else. The man lunges after him and yells for him to wait. Derrick repeats that he should call another person, reminding him that he avoids suspicious work. The man snaps back that if that is the case, he will do it himself, but then he shouts that they need a mage, complaining that mages are rare in mercenary companies these days. He points straight at Derrick and says that Derrick is the only one suitable, which is why he is being asked. Derrick lowers his gaze and says that he does not understand why a mage is necessary just to hunt a few monsters, adding that he would rather not get involved without reason. The man barks again and thrusts out a single gold coin, shouting that it is 1 Adel gold coin, then quickly clarifies that it is not the full payment, but merely the down payment. The coin rests in Derrick's palm as his expression hardens. Soon after, a group arrives, an older man wearing a monocle with a neatly groomed mustache, a well-dressed woman at his side, and a hooded woman whose face remains hidden in shadow. The broad man gestures toward them and tells Derrick to greet them, saying that these are his clients. The mustached man studies Derrick and says that this will not do. He scoffs that Derrick is a child who has not even undergone a coming-of-age ceremony. He says that he had expectations after hearing Derrick distinguished himself in the Dawn War, but clicks his tongue and complains that sending such a young boy on this request is unacceptable. The broad man waves his hands frantically and argues with urgency, insisting that Derrick is the real deal and claiming that he is the most capable mage he knows. The mustached man turns away and says that they are leaving, declaring that this mission cannot be entrusted to a child. At the doorway, the butler pauses as the woman beside him leans closer and murmurs something quietly. His expression tightens as he glances back, while the hooded woman remains to the side, silently observing without revealing her face. The hooded woman turns toward Derrick and asks if he is Derrick, then says that they should speak. After that, they move to the Grand Duchy of Duplain. On the outskirts, a goblin leaps out with a shrill cry and Derrick steps forward without hesitation. His blade flashes once, cutting cleanly through the charge as blood sprays and the creature's body snaps aside before collapsing. Another goblin attacks from behind, but Derrick twists away and strikes again, dropping it before the blow lands. As more rush in, blue mana crackles around his body and lashes outward in sharp lines, binding the goblins in place. Electric light fills the air as their limbs stiffen and their movements stop one by one. Derrick glances over his shoulder and says that it is finished, addressing the dispatch officer. The man folds his arms and says that he understands. The hooded woman's lips curve slightly as she says that Derrick captured all of them very quickly. Back at Beldurn's Tears Tavern, a blonde woman erupts in anger and shouts that Derrick has become a noble's dog, calling his name as she storms forward. She tries to climb onto a table, and the broad man panics, telling her to get down and warning that there are customers present. She snaps that even if they are shabby commoners, they should not debase themselves by serving nobles. She demands to know how much the job paid, accusing Derrick of throwing away his pride to crawl between a noble's legs. He curtly says that crawling between legs was not part of the request. The blonde woman asked how much he got, joking if it was only a silver coin. The man shakes his head, then breaks into a grin and declares that it was 1 gold coin. Her face lights up as she screams in disbelief. She immediately begs to crawl between Noble's legs as well, and the broad man snaps at her to be quiet, shouting again that crawling is not part of the request. Later that night, the blonde woman lies sprawled across a table, asleep with her cheek resting in a pool of drool. The broad man asks how the job went. Derrick says that it was nothing special, explaining that he simply caught a few goblins. The man comments that the first impression was poor, but says that the clients seem wealthy. Derrick agrees, then adds that all 3 of them were lying. The man asks if he is serious. Derrick explains that a noble family's dispatch officer should possess youth, stamina, and social ability, and says that he looked for those traits but found none. He adds that the woman claiming to be a scullery maid had hands far too clean for someone who does physical labor. He begins to mention the supposed apprentice inspector as well. The broad man cuts him off, calling his name and saying that mercenaries do not need to pry into their clients' affairs. He says that they should simply complete the job and collect the payment, nothing more. Derrick answers that he understands. He thinks that Jaden is probably right, and that in the wild only survival matters. He tells himself that everything else is irrelevant. The next day, in the Grand Duchy of Duplain, Derrick reports that the area has been cleared, and that goblins will not appear again for some time. The monocled man acknowledges this and says that it is good work. Jaden immediately turns to business and asks about the remaining payment. When the coins are presented, Jaden's eyes shine as he excitedly shows them off, shouting that it is 2 gold coins and marveling at the amount. Derrick tells him to put them away and speak properly. The monocled man clears his throat and says that he highly values Derrick's abilities, adding that he wishes to entrust him with another request. Jaden blurts out in confusion. The man explains that the Grand Duke's estate is offering 15 idle gold coins for this task. Jaden explodes in shock at the number, and the man asks Derrick if he will accept. Derrick answers that he will. A carriage sets out, and they arrive at Duplain Manor within the Grand Duchy. Jaden stares at the enormous residence and says that it is impressive. Before entering, the monocled man says that he should properly introduce himself. Jaden panics at the sudden formality and tries to wave it off, saying that they have already worked together and should be comfortable. The man states that his name is Delin and that he serves as the chief steward of the Grand Duke's estate, then apologizes for concealing his identity due to the nature of his duties. Jaden falters, overwhelmed by how distinguished their clients are. A woman steps forward and says that she is Katerina, the head maid of the Grand Duke's estate. Jaden hurriedly introduces himself afterward, saying that he is Jaden, leader of the Beldern Mercenary Company. Derrick watches in silence, thinking that they were never a dispatch officer and a scullery maid, but the chief steward and the head maid. He tells himself that he expected as much, though their ranks are higher than he imagined. The hooded woman approaches, her dress brushing against the stone floor as she walks. Derrick looks toward her and begins to piece everything together, thinking that if this is the case, then she must be. The hood is drawn back, her hair spilling free as she reveals herself. She says that she is Iselin Eleanor Duplain. She states that she wishes to appoint Derrick as the magic tutor for her younger sister, Diella. Iselin Eleanor Duplain, the eldest daughter of the Duplain family, meets Derrick's eyes as she makes her request. The Grand Duchy of Duplain's residence rose in pale stone and sharp spires, servants and guards moving in quiet order beneath the open sky. Inside, Raig hurried into an office and calls for his father and for Valerian to look at something. The man behind the desk glares and asks what Raig thinks he is doing, telling him to conduct himself with dignity. Raig snaps back that the one who needs dignity is not him but Diella, saying that she has gone too far and is now even laying hands on the people he hired. A maid trembles nearby with tears in her eyes. Valerian cuts in and tells Raig to lower his voice, saying that they are in the middle of a conversation. Raig refuses to back down and says that more than 10 servants quit just last month, adding that she smashes objects whenever she feels like it. He demands to know how long his father will keep turning a blind eye. Valerian's patience breaks. He calls Raig's name sharply. Raig speaks calmly and says that even if Diella is a good-for-nothing, they still have Iselin. Then he says that it is time to let Diella go. His father immediately shuts it down and says that it is not for Raig to decide. Raig presses on anyway, saying that he had the steward look into a monastery. He says that the facilities are good and that children of nobles go there as well. He argues that instead of living while being treated like a burden, it would be better for Diella to devote herself to God's will, and he adds that if keeping her here will bring great trouble to the family, then it would be better too. His father moves in an instant and seizes him, forcing him down with crushing pressure. He says that he believes he already told him that it is not Raig's decision to make, and he repeats Raig's name like a final warning. Raig lies rigid under his grip, then he says that when the time comes to decide, his father must be the one to decide. Later, Derrick walks the halls with Iselin. Iselin asks if he has ever heard about her younger sister, Diella. Derrick says that he has seen Lady Diella in the Duplain family's registry. Iselin confirms it and says that Diella is probably not well known to the public. A door swings open with a heavy sound, from which Valerian and Raig come out. Iselin stammers Valerian's name. Valerian steps into view and greets Iselin, saying that it has been a while. Then he asks how her experience in Ebelstein has been. Aislinn answers that thanks to his care, she has been living comfortably. Valerian glances to the side, notices that Rhaeg looks hurt, and says they should catch up later. Aislinn says that she understands. Derrick watches silently, his gaze sharpening as the pieces settle into place. Valerian stands beside Rhaeg, pressing a cloth to Rhaeg's head as if wiping away sweat or calming him down, and both of them stare forward with restrained faces. Derrick watches from the side, his red eyes narrowing as he notices the tension in the room. A maid stands a short distance away, hunched and shaking, covering her face with her hands as she cries. In the Grand Duke's office, he sits with composed posture and says that he is relieved to hear she has been doing well in Ibelstein. She says that it is all thanks to her father. With a gentle smile, she introduces Derrick as the magic tutor she brought from Ibelstein, explaining that he said he would take charge of Diella. The Grand Duke studies Derrick and says that he understands. Aislinn rises and says that since her father seems busy, they will take their leave. She turns to go, and Derrick follows half a step behind her, but the Grand Duke calls out and orders Derrick to stay behind. Derrick pauses at the threshold, glances back with a guarded expression and falls silent. The Grand Duke continues working at his desk, pen moving across paper. Then he looks up and comments that Derrick is quite young, confirming that he is 16. Derrick answers that yes. The Grand Duke asks if Derrick can handle magic to some extent. Derrick replies that he can use a bit of one-star magic. The Grand Duke chuckles quietly and says that Derrick has no reason to lie. He adds that humility does not always come off as a sign of virtue. Derrick keeps his face still, but he thinks that the Grand Duke's name carries weight, and he concludes that humility will not work on a 5-star mage. Derrick says that he apologizes if he came off as disrespectful. The Grand Duke says that it is fine, and he says that he knows why Derrick carries himself that way, warning that being too talented can end up eating away at a person. He then says that judging by Derrick's age and attire, he does not look like someone suited to be a magic tutor. Derrick answers that he is a mercenary. The Grand Duke says that since Aislinn chose Derrick, he will not pry any further. He grants Derrick entry to the annex of the residence where Diella lives, and he orders that a maid guide him, telling him that he may go now. Derrick stops and asks to request one thing. The Grand Duke tells him to proceed. Derrick says that he is a mercenary, and if he takes a commission, it is his duty to see it through. He states plainly that Lady Aislinn commissioned him, so that Lady Dilla may learn magic and enter high society as a proper noble. The Grand Duke responds that Derrick is merely spelling out the obvious. Derrick says that he is doing it because he has an earnest request to make. The Grand Duke's expression shifts with quiet curiosity. Elsewhere in the residence, a plate is thrown, crashes and shatters on the wall, fragments skittering through the room. A maid recoils with a scream and collapses into a trembling bow, saying that she is sorry and apologizing sincerely to Miss Diella. Diella stands over her with cold eyes and says that the maid is foolish for thinking an apology will change anything, given her status. She orders the maid to get out of her sight immediately, and she threatens that if the maid shows herself one more time, she will throw another plate at her lowly face. In the waiting room, a cup and saucer sit untouched on the table as Jaden blurts out why Derrick of all people was chosen, insisting that magic tutors should have been lined up in front of Duplain, and that a commoner would have difficulty working as a noble's magic tutor. Aislinn lowers her gaze and says that she thinks she tried almost every famous magic master on the entire continent, but in the end they all gave up. She says that is why she opted for someone who can use magic but is under desperate circumstances. She argues that although Derrick has the background of a mercenary, he seems to know a bit about how nobles conduct themselves and their culture. Jaden replies that Derrick's master was a fallen noble who used to be quite successful, and Derrick must have learned all sorts of things from him. Aislinn smiles and says that she also figured Derrick was refined and kind despite being a mercenary, and that she thought he might be able to gently rein Diella in and lead her. Jaden laughs lightly and says that Lady Aislinn needs to learn how to see through people better. Aislinn blinks and asks what he means. Jaden explains that Derrick is a mage who grew up on the streets and worked as a mercenary before he even came of age. Then he asks if Aislinn truly thinks someone from the streets can survive from nothing with kindness. Aislinn's expression tightens, but she stays silent. After that, Dellen and the maid escort Derrick down the corridor. Derrick walks ahead with a calm face and lowered gaze, stopping at a tall door. He raises a gloved hand, hesitates for a brief beat, then knocks. He listens, then reaches for the handle and opens the door. Derrick steps inside and greets the person within, introducing himself as Derrick and asking to be excused for a moment. A girl sits in a chair near the bright window and tells him to come closer. She turns enough for her hair to catch the light, and she is revealed as Diella Catherine Duplain, the second daughter of House Duplain. Derrick takes a step toward her, cloak trailing behind him. Diella's lips curl as she watches him approach. In the next instant, a splash erupts, cold water arcs through the air and slams into Derrick's face and chest, soaking his hair and cloak. He stiffens under the impact, droplets running down his jaw as he exhales without a word. Diella clasps a hand to her mouth and says that this is horrible, pretending surprise as she claims she thought some sewer rat had come in. She asks if Derrick is the mercenary the Grand Steward mentioned. Then she tilts her head and says that looking at him again, maybe he really is a sewer rat. She plants a foot onto a chair and climbs up, looming above him in her red dress. She spills another bucket on him and says that she prepared it for him, asking if it brings back memories of his hometown. She says that being drenched in gutter water suits him much better. Water continues dripping from Derrick's hair and lashes as he stands motionless, eyes lowered, saying nothing. Diella glances at the emptied container and complains that she ran out of water, calling it a shame and saying this is disappointing. Derrick finally raises his eyes slightly, and Diella's expression shifts as she lets out a small. Diella's expression twists as Derrick's eyes lift toward her. She kicks him down and she snaps that he has no right to look at her. Diella stands over him in her red dress with her chin raised. She takes off her shoe as she mutters in disgust and says that he stinks, covering her nose as she looks at the water dripping from him. She throws her shoe at him before she plants herself in front of him and tells him to know his place, calling him a sewer rat. She mocks the idea of someone like him teaching her, and she says that the streets clearly did not teach him any common sense. Elsewhere, the Grand Duke's office sits heavy with books and documents, sunlight spilling across the desk. The Duke recalls the earlier meeting. Derrick faces the Grand Duke and says that the fact he is here means Lady Diella's problem cannot be resolved easily. He says that he wants to ask the one who loves Lady Diella more than anyone else how much authority he is willing to grant him when it comes to teaching Lady Diella. The Grand Duke listens in silence, his gaze sharpening as the request lands. Back in Diella's room, the air snaps with a sudden impact. Diella's head jerks, her cheek flushing as shock floods her eyes. She drops to the floor, stunned, one hand rising toward the place she was struck. Derrick stands above her in cold shadow, his cloak hanging heavy and his red eyes unmoved. He looks down at her and tells her to get up. 3 years ago. A wagon rattles along a country road as Derrick sits beside his teacher. He calls her teacher and asks what she would do if she had to teach a stubborn student who did not appreciate kindness. She thinks for a moment and says that she would try to understand them, embrace them, and take them in. Derrick asks if that is not too idealistic. Then he asks what she would do with a student he cannot even do that with. She says that the essence of teaching is to lead a student in a better direction, and she says that if he cannot communicate through understanding and acceptance, he must find a different starting point. Derrick asks what a different starting point is. His teacher answers that it is by carving fear into them. Back in the room, Diella's eyes widen as Derrick moves. A sharp impact snaps through the air, and Diella's cheek flushes as she drops to the floor, stunned and clutching her face. Derrick stands over her and says that she will treat others with consideration and respect. He warns her not to make him say things twice, and he orders her to get up. Diella pushes herself up with shaking anger and swings at him, her strike thirding into his cheek. She trembles and screams that how dare the likes of him, and she starts shouting that he dares lay a hand on, only to get bitch slapped again. Derrick looks down at her and says that he will not make her say things twice either. He repeats that when she deals with others, she will do so with consideration and respect. Diella's lips twitch into a disbelieving smile as she lets out a small, confused sound. Then she whirls and screams for the Grand Steward, shouting that this lowborn dared to put his hands on a young lady. The Chief Steward rushes in with maids close behind. He calls out to ask if Lady Diella is alright, then he glares at Derrick and demands to know what he thinks he is doing. He shouts that Derrick dared to lay a hand on the young lady and warns that if the Grand Duke finds out. Derrick calmly raises a sealed document and says that His Grace has granted him full authority over all of Miss Diella's education. He adds that His Grace has permitted him to employ whatever method he chooses. The Chief Steward stammers as he reads, and Diella stares up at the paper in shock. Night falls over Duplain residence. Ray grabs Valerian's arm in the corridor and pleads for him to calm down, but Valerian storms forward and shouts that so Derrick is the mercenary. Derrick sits waiting inside silent, eyes lifted only slightly. Valerian lunges in rage and screams how Derrick dares hit Diella, and Ray clings tighter and begs him to put that down and talk. Derrick turns his head and says that it is something His Grace permitted. Ray forces Valerian back and says that Derrick is a guest Iselin brought, warning that if Valerian acts like this, it will harm Iselin's position. Ray adds that their father allowed it too. Valerian's jaw tightens as he swallows his fury. Valerian points at Derrick and orders him to come with him. He snaps at Ray not to interfere and tells him to go attend to his own matters. Ray walks with Derrick and says that he heard what happened, and he says that Diella does need a beating before she comes to her senses. He tells Derrick not to worry, saying that Valerian will not go too far. Derrick glances back over his shoulder as he walks, his red eyes steady and unreadable. Ahead of him, Valerian continues down the corridor, and Ray watches them go from behind. Ray mutters that he does not know why Valerian is protecting that hopeless one. In a dim space lit by a narrow beam, Small Doll sits rigidly on the floor. Valerian stops at a closed door and tells Derrick to come in. Inside, he says that this is the room Diella used when she stayed in the main house, and that it has been left like this ever since. Derrick steps into the cold, quiet room and looks over the canvases and the scattered traces of paint. Valerian says that Diella used to love drawing. He says that every time she asked him to look at her drawings, her face would turn red, and that she was so adorable. He adds that she never finished a drawing, and that most of the time she would leave a blank space and only draw the parts she liked. Valerian pauses, then says that he is sorry about earlier, admitting that he got emotional and apologizing for it. Derrick answers that he does not need to worry about it. Derrick looks at the unfinished paintings and asks why Valerian brought him to this room. Valerian says that he wanted to show Derrick that Diella was not a child who deserved to be despised or beaten, but that at some point she started obsessing excessively over bloodline. He says that in the end she was driven out of the main house and locked away in the annex. He cannot even guess what turned her into that. Valerian says that they have to stop her from being sent to the monastery. He says that if she learns even one star magic, he will be able to persuade their father somehow. He grips Derrick's shoulders with desperation and begs him to please save Diella. Derrick freezes mid-breath and says that he should wait. He flips open a book and says that she did not completely give up on magic, judging by all the notes in the margins of these books. Derrick points toward the stacks and asks if the books over there are all theory books from the School of Regulations. Valerian answers that yes, and says that is right, because nobles learn from the School of Regulations. Derrick closes the book slowly, eyes narrowing in thought, then he says that he will give it a try. Night settles over the annex. Diella lies asleep in bed, her hair spread across the pillow, breathing slow and careless. Derrick stands over her with a bucket in hand and tips it without hesitation. Cold water crashes down and Diella jolts awake with a scream, thrashing under the drenched sheets. Derrick looks down at her and asks if she is seriously falling asleep right now. Diella gasps, blinking through the shock, and chokes out what is happening, then demands to know if he is out of his mind. Derrick grabs hold of her and says that she needs to come with him for a moment, because there is somewhere they need to go. Diella fights against his grip and screams for him to let go, shouting that he has no right to touch her and demanding to know if he is crazy. Diella screams that it hurts and orders Derrick to let go, insisting that she is not going with him. In the hallway, maids watch as she shouts at Derrick to stop, calling him a lowborn and demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. Under the cold moonlight outside, Derrick keeps moving without slowing, pulling Diella along as her nightgown drags through the grass. She stumbles and he yanks her forward again until she is forced down hard, crying out as she hits the ground. Diella glares up through tears and rage, demanding to know what he thinks doing this will change. She snaps that he should wake up from his dream, and asks who he thinks he is to dare teach her. Derrick cuts in and asks if she does not even want to listen, saying that he has an interesting fact. Diella freezes, confused, and hesitates. Derrick says that honestly he has no intention of teaching her magic. He adds that he simply likes beating up stuck-up nobles. Diella jolts and asks what he just said. Derrick asks if she does not agree, saying there is no reason for someone from the bottom to like nobles. He says that this tutor nonsense is only an excuse to beat up arrogant, high and mighty nobles like her. His hand closes around the hilt at his waist, and the blade shifts as if he is ready to draw. He asks if she knows how beautiful the screams of those oh-so-noble people are. Diella's breath catches as she asks if he thinks he will be safe after doing something like this. Derrick answers that of course he will be safe, because she is going to be shoved into a monastery soon anyway. He asks who would believe anything she says. He continues coldly, saying that if something really big happens, he can just apologize with his life, and he adds that a commoner's life is worth that much, is it not? He says that he could also just run away, and that they would forget about him soon enough. He says that he would be doing Duplin a favor by getting rid of its headache after all. Diella's face drains as she tells herself that she is going to die. She bolts. She runs across the night grass, dress whipping behind her, and she tells herself that if she gets caught by him now, she will die. She tells herself that if she cuts across the grassland toward the residence, he will catch her right away. She decides she has to shake him off in the forest. She tells herself that if it is the forest, she knows it well, and she can run back to the residence from there. As she pushes harder, panic blazing in her eyes, she tells herself that then he will be the one who dies instead. A sudden heat flares behind her. Diella jerks mid-stride at the burning glow, and her eyes widen as a swirling sphere of fire blooms in the darkness. She stares, realizing it is a fireball. Then she panics as she remembers that fireball is 2-star magic. She demands to know how that bastard can use 2-star magic. The blazing orb drops like a falling sun, roaring down into the ground near her. The explosion throws light and heat across the forest edge, and Diella screams as the flames erupt beside her. The fireball detonates in a violent bloom, dirt and sparks blasting outward as Diella is thrown back, arms flailing while heat washes over her. She twists on the ground, eyes wide and shaking, and she sees Derrick in the smoke with a faint smile. He says that he guesses he missed. Diella scrambles up and runs, feet pounding through wet grass as she grits her teeth and forces herself forward. She stumbles hard and drops to her hands, groaning as her knees hit the ground, and a sharp blue streak slams into the earth nearby with a cracking impact. Diella jerks her head up, breath ragged. Another blue shot bites into the ground close enough to spray dirt, and Derrick's voice carries through the dark. He says that she is pretty quick. Then he says that it is hard to believe that speed belongs to someone who has been shut inside the annex all day. Diella glances back with trembling fury, then bolts again into the forest path. As she runs, her thoughts spiral. She wonders how long she has to keep running, and whether she can even get away. She tells herself that at this rate, he will definitely catch her. Behind her, Derrick drops to one knee and presses a glowing hand to the soil, mana rippling in a circle like water. He lifts his gaze toward the trees and thinks that this forest is the one he saw in the paintings. He thinks that it must be where she has been running around since she was little. He thinks that without even realizing it, she felt the mana in the vast wilds and transferred that feeling onto the canvas. And he concludes that this is definitely. Diella suddenly whirls back with a ragged scream, raising a heavy rock over her head and bringing it down with all her weight. Derrick quickly draws his sword and slashes the rock with a quick slash. Diella freezes, eyes blown wide at the failed blow. Derrick steps forward with his sword lowered at his side, and says that he will admit her spirit is admirable, adding that knowing it would be hard to shake his pursuit, she chose to strike back instead, and that could not have been an easy decision. Diella pants on hands and knees, shaking as she tries to lift herself. Derrick looks down and says that she does not even have the strength left to run anymore. He raises the blade and points it toward her and asks if she has any last words. Diella lets out a strained, bitter laugh. She says that he must be joking if he thinks she is going to apologize, and she says that unlike lowborns, she does not grovel. She tells him to just kill her. Derrick lowers his blade slightly and asks why she is so obsessed with bloodline. Diella's shoulders shake as she turns away, then she asks what she would have left, saying that if someone takes away her great bloodline, what does she have left? She curls into herself and chants that it is magic, repeating it like a desperate prayer. With tears running down her cheeks, she cries out and asks if he thinks she never tried. She bends forward, nails digging into the dirt, and says that no matter how hard she tries, it still does not work. She says that if she gets weeded out of everything, magic or painting, then if she falls behind in everything, she will lose everything. She whispers again that if even bloodline is gone, then what is she, and she breaks down with the question hanging. Derrick watches in silence. Mana flares along his sword. He lifts it high, blue light crawling over the steel, and he says that he has heard enough. He says goodbye. The blade swings and a sharp blue arc tears through the air. In the next instant, jagged ice erupts from the ground around Diella, blooming upward into a crystalline cage. Diella freezes, eyes widening as cold light surrounds her, and she stares at her own hands as if they no longer belong to her. She trembles and mutters that it is magic. Derrick lowers his sword and places a hand over his chest, then he says that it is good work, Lady Diella, and asks her to pardon his rudeness. He says that it may not be something she could truly call magic if it is just a manifestation of mana, but he says that she still did it. Diella's breath catches in her throat, and a strangled sound escapes her. The cold bites deeper, panic floods her face, and she screams until her voice cracks inside the glittering ice. Later, under the moon, Derrick sits with her in the forest and says that it means she is from the School of the Wild. Diella repeats it in disbelief and asks what the School of the Wild is. Derrick says that it is right, and he says that he has heard most nobles learn the School of Regulations. He explains that at its core every school of magic is essentially the same, but it differs enormously in the process of understanding and mastering it. Diella gathers herself as he says that she is from the School of the Wild, and that trying to learn magic through the theory of the School of Regulations was bound to cause problems. She was not just trying to wear clothes that do not fit, but that it is like forcing herself into clothes that will not even go on her body. She looks straight at him and asks how he knew, asking how he knew she is from the School of the Wild. Derrick says that he saw the drawings she made. He says that she could feel mana drifting through nature and put it onto the canvas. Derrick says that mages born with the temperament of the School of the Wild usually sense the mana in nature when they are young. Diella listens with a stiff face, eyes still wet but focused on him. Derrick looks her over and says that is enough, and that she should be able to walk now. Diella steadies her feet and silently tests her balance, thinking that this is not bad with just this much. Derrick turns away and says that she succeeded in manifesting mana, but she still has a long way to go. He says that starting tomorrow, he will teach her how to manifest mana naturally. Diella calls Derrick's name, hesitates, then awkwardly says thanks. Derrick gives no immediate reply, then says they should go. Diella blurts that she's going with him too, hurrying after his back. As they walk under the moon, he brings up the sunset painting and asks if it was her work. Diella says that she does not know, and that it has been a long time since she put down a brush. He says that it was beautifully done. Diella's expression softens as she says that it was her masterpiece, and she adds that he is the first person who realized it was finished. Morning light pours into the room. Diella bolts upright in bed, then raises her hand and tries to gather mana again. A faint swirl forms at her fingertips, and she mutters that this is hard. Outside, a maid approaches with a bucket. As the door opens, startling the maid into a scream as the bucket jolts and the water sloshes onto Diella's pajamas. The maid panics and stammers an apology, saying she is sorry. Diella stands there, glaring. The maid gets down on all fours and starts begging for forgiveness. Diella tells the maid to watch where she is going. The maid freezes, confused by the lack of punishment, and crawls back in shock. Other maids gather and ask if she is okay and whether she was hit. The maid says that she is fine and that Lady Diella only told her to be careful. Someone murmurs, unable to understand what happened after Lady Diella went out last night, while Diella walks away down the hall without looking back. Derrick sleeps, face half buried in his pillow, until loud knocking and a sharp voice call his name again and again. He groans and sits up, rubbing his eye, and asks what it is. Dylan stands with Diella and warns her to mind her manners, saying this is inappropriate. Diella demands that Derrick teach her how to handle the mana she manifested. She says that she tried on her own but it is not working. Dylan's face contorts in shock as he realizes and repeats to himself that she manifested mana. Diella insists that Derrick said he would teach her today, so he should hurry up and teach her. Dylan tells her to come back in the afternoon and leads her away. As they leave, Dylan mutters with teary relief that Lady Diella finally did it. She clicks her tongue. Diella whips around in irritation and demands to know who he thinks he is, ordering her to come back later. She pounds on the door, shouting for it to be opened right now. and demanding to be taught immediately. Derrick, still exhausted, lies back down as the banging continues outside. Morning light washed over Duplin residence, the long roofs and high walls gleaming under a clear sky. In a corridor, maids worked with brooms and buckets, whispering as footsteps passed by. One maid asks if the other heard the rumor, saying that people were saying Lady Diella did not break a single plate. The other maid agrees excitedly and says that she splashed water that morning and did not get hit for it. The first maid leans closer and adds that they were also saying Lady Diella manifested magic, and the other maid gasps and asks if that is serious. A sharp set of steps stops near them. Raig turns, his face tightening, and he asks what they just said. Not long after, the Grand Duke sits behind his desk, pen moving as papers pile neatly nearby. Raig and Valerian sit across from him, the air heavy with restraint. The Grand Duke repeats the report with a measured tone, asking if Diella manifested magic. Valerian answers that yes and says that he asked the head butler and the servants repeatedly. The Grand Duke calls it a relief. Raig does not relax. He says that they should not jump to conclusions just because she manifested magic. Valerian snaps at Raig by name, saying that his sister manifested magic and he should be praising her. The Grand Duke falls silent, eyes unreadable as he continues writing. Raig reminds them that they remember everything she has done up until now. He insists that a result as small as this should not be enough to brush aside sending her to the convent. The Dyke stays silent, thoughts unknown. Later, sunlight spills through Diella's window, dust motes drifting in the bright air. Diella sits on her bed in her red dress, knees pulled in and arms wrapped tight around them. Derrick stands nearby with a flat expression and asks if she is sulking. Diella answers that she is not sulking, and says that she is angry. Derrick says that even if she acts spiteful like that, it will not change anything. Diella repeats that she is not being spiteful, and insists again that she is angry. Derrick says that even if she keeps pouting, there is nothing they can do, adding that there is an order to everything. Diella whips around, face red with fury, and shouts that she is not pouting and that she said she is angry. Derrick stares at her in silence. Diella grinds her teeth, then forces the words out and says that fine, they can say she is pouting. Derrick tilts his head slightly, confused by the sudden shift. He drags a chair and sits with a book in hand, warning that just because she manifested magic does not mean she can go around using it, or it will backfire. He says that he is saying it because he has been through it. He adds that rest is just as important as learning, and tells her that she has rested enough, so now she needs to study. Diella folds her arms and scoffs, saying that of course the stuffy magic teacher would say that, and she sarcastically announces that the stiff lecture has begun. The room darkens under Derrick's gaze, his red eyes sharpening as pressure seems to fill the air. He asks if he should teach her in a way that is not stuffy. The memory of last night's fireball flashes in Diella's eyes, and she flinches hard. She hastily backs down, huffing that she will forget it. Derrick lets the tension drop and raises his hand, calm again. He says that today they will practice magic manifestation. He explains that once she can freely use magic manifestation, she will be able to learn one-star magic before long. He says that the School of the Wild has no rigid system, so it is ideal for self-study, and that it pursues far more freedom than the School of Regulations. Then he adds honestly that she actually suits the School of the Wild quite well. Diella's scowl falters. She stares at him with a guarded frown and asks what he is talking about. Derrick looks Diella in the eyes and says that it is exactly what it sounds like. He says that her free, spirited nature has good compatibility with the School of the Wild. He adds that on top of that, she was born with Duplin blood, so she is overflowing with talent. Diella's eyes widen and she stammers, asking if he is saying she is talented. Derrick confirms it and says that if she can conjure up an ice wall the instant she manifests, then she is certainly overflowing with talent. Diella's face lights up in shock and she asks if that means she is some kind of genius. Derrick says that having talent and being a genius are clearly different things. Diella snaps back that they are the same thing. Derrick tells her they are different, and she huffs, then says fine and sarcastically calls herself amazing before asking what is next. Outside, Raig hears their talk drifting through the garden and clicks his tongue in irritation. The next day, Diella rushes to Derrick and says that she can do magic manifestation now, but she cannot get the direction right. She demands that he look, holding up swirling mana. The day after, she says that she tried imbuing it with cold, but something feels off. Derrick sits at the table with spellbooks open, spoon in hand, and listens while reading. Another day later, she chases him through the hall again and says that she can feel the magic, but the sensation is weird. Derrick keeps walking without looking up, still absorbed in his notes. Next day, at sunset outside near a tree, Diella storms up yet again, calling Derrick's name and demanding to know what he is doing there. She scolds him and says she told him to stay near the annex. She asks if her father lent him those spellbooks so he could slack off, and he says yes, he lent them to him for that purpose. Diella glares, then grabs his sleeve and says she succeeded at letting the magic flow out like he said, so he should hurry up and check it. Later, Valerian stands in a bright room with his hands behind his back when the door opens and Derrick asks if he called for him. Valerian tells him to take a seat so they can talk, then asks how Diella has been lately. Derrick says that she has made quite a bit of progress, but learning one-star magic will likely take a bit more time. Valerian says that he understands. He says that his mother, who went to a social gathering, will probably return sometime next week, and he warns Derrick in advance that she is not someone he can take lightly. He says the people in the estate are fine, but that nobles by nature do not like commoners holding key positions, and he asks if Derrick knows that too. Derrick says that he will keep it in mind and asks if that is why Valerian called him. Valerian pauses, then says that he is the next head of House Dupline, and that means it is a position where he embraces and includes the members of their house. He says that to do that, he must be sincere with every member, but that it is really difficult because a person's heart can be so deep and profound. He says that it would be nice if everyone's thoughts and values were the same, but that is not the reality. Derrick asks what Valerian is trying to say. Valerian admits that Diela will not play with him. Derrick. He says that he still vividly remembers how she used to welcome him with a smile when they were little, and he asks where he would find another angel like that in the world. He then asks Derrick if there is some kind of way, a way to win Diela's favor. Derrick asks why Valerian is asking him that. Valerian replies that is because he is the only one Diela follows around. Outside somewhere in the estate, Diela shouts for Derrick again, demanding to know where he went as she searches. Before my boy could leave, Valerian stops him again and insists Derrick look at something first. He says that he learned how to make dolls from the maids, then asks what Derrick thinks. He presents a stitched doll dressed like Diela and proudly asks if it does not look exactly like her, then asks if Derrick can feel his big brother love from it. Derrick stares at it coldly and asks if Valerian is trying to curse someone. Valerian flinches embarrassed and says Derrick is completely useless for this sort of thing. Not long after, Derrick stands in the manor while servants and attendants gather. A refined woman approaches with a practiced smile and says she has heard a lot about him, and that they found a very capable magic teacher. She introduces herself as Morella Dibel Duplin. She says that if it would not be an inconvenience, she would like to send him a gift from her territory. Derrick answers that he is not affiliated with any house. Morella asks what he means. Derrick says that he is a commoner. Morella recoils, eyes widening, repeating in disbelief that he is a commoner. 1 week earlier, a carriage had arrived at the Grand Duke's residence. Aceline told Derrick that she was glad they brought him there. She said that as Diela's older sister she wanted to stay by Diela's side longer, but she had a lot to take care of in Ebelstein, so she was leaving Diela to him. Derrick answered that he understood. Jaden later clapped Derrick heavily and teased that trusting him with her sister sounded lifeless, then told him to wrap things up quickly and come back, warning that if Pelline found out, she would make a huge fuss again. He said he was counting on Derrick. As Derrick stood near the carriage, Aceline suddenly covered her mouth and said she completely forgot. Jaden asked what she meant. Aceline said her mother would be returning next week, and she forgot to give Derrick a heads up. Jaden asked if that was something he needed a heads up about. Aceline hesitated and, in her thoughts, admitted her mother was a little hard to describe, like a god of anger. Back in the present, the doors to the Grand Duke's office opened with a heavy presence. Morella strode in and demanded to know why a commoner was Diela's teacher and what that was all about. The Grand Duke calmly said that he could hear just fine, so she should lower her voice. Morella snapped that lowering her voice was not the problem, and insisted that it was Diela, their beloved youngest daughter. The Grand Duke addressed Morella by name and said that, as she knew, he did not exactly like appointing commoners to positions. But every teacher with a good bloodline threw up their hands and gave up. She demanded to know how he could take in someone who used to roll around in the mercenary world. The Grand Duke stated that finding a decent magic teacher was not easy, and added that Derrick was recommended by Aceline. Morella bristled and insisted that even so, there had to be a certain standard. Morella says that they have her younger brother, Flam. She says Flam was busy last time, but it is different now because Diela manifested magic too, so if Flam comes and teaches her. The Grand Duke cuts her off and says she wants to pull the person managing the territory and turn him into a private teacher. He asks if she thinks running Ebelstein will work if they handle it that haphazardly. Morella counters by shouting about Ebelstein's social circle and demands if he thinks that circle runs haphazardly too, then declares that it is a war zone there as well. She points out that socially, a teacher matters more than anything. She rages that Derrick is a commoner with no family name, and demands if they want Diela to become a laughingstock when she debuts in high society. Valerian steps in and places a hand to calm her, saying that Mother should calm down for a moment. He says she did not come here just to fight with Father, did she? Morella jerks away and orders Valerian to step aside, saying this is not something they can let slide. A voice cuts in, saying that in the end, the question is whether the commoner mage has the qualities to be Diela's teacher, and he asks his mother if that is not right. Raig moves forward with cold composure and says that a commoner becoming a noble's magic teacher is not a normal situation. He then adds that if the commoner truly has the necessary qualities, he does not think it will be a major problem. He says that he will test the qualities of the man called Derrick, and begins to propose defeating him in a magic spar. The Grand Duke cuts him off with a single word and says enough. He states that Derrick is the real deal as a mage. Raig falls silent, then pivots and asks what about testing Diela. He argues that if Derrick is such an excellent teacher, then Diela, who received his instruction, must have achieved excellent results as well. He says he will personally spar with Diela and verify her results. As they exit the office, Valerian calls Raig's name sharply and demands what on earth he is thinking by suggesting a magic spar. Raig does not soften. He asks if Valerian truly believes Diela has turned over a new leaf, and whether he has forgotten what she has done. Valerian insists that even so, she is their only sister, and they need to hold her close and protect her. Rhaeg scoffs at the mention of blood and says that blood is what has been trying to bring their house down. He says that if she debuts in high society like this, it really will be the end of them. Valerian stares and asks if that is truly how Rhaeg feels. Rhaeg answers that Diella was the first one to cross the line, and says the best thing for Diella is to be kept shut away in the annex. Early the next morning, a bird flutters outside the window as Diella storms into Derrick's room, shouting his name. Derrick looks up from an open spellbook and asks what it is so early in the morning. Diella slams down the spar notice and says that if she loses this magic spar, he is fired. Derrick replies that he heard. He adds that young Master Rhaeg is already a seasoned 1-star mage, so it will probably be difficult to win. Diella explodes and demands if that is all he has to say, shouting again that he is going to get fired. Derrick stays seated, holds the rolled document calmly, and says that he is a mercenary. He says that he does the job he is hired to do, and he takes the pay that comes with it, and that is all. He adds that he has already been paid more than enough. Diella's anger falters into confusion, and she asks if he really means that. 1 week later, the Duplain flag flutters above the residence, and the wide courtyard below fills with attendants gathering in orderly lines. The Grand Duke walks out with his wife and a butler at his back, his gaze fixed ahead as if judging the day's outcome before it begins. Derrick stands waiting with his cloak drawn close, and he says that the Duke has come. Derrick adjusts the front of his cloak without a tremor. Watching him, the Grand Duke thinks that Derrick does not look nervous at all, and he wonders if that means Derrick is confident. The Grand Duke thinks that Derrick has a certain nerve in a situation like this, and he decides that this is not someone they should underestimate yet. Boots approach with measured steps, the hem of a cape swaying, and Rhaeg advances with a cold expression. Rhaeg thinks that this will not be a simple magic spar, and he swears that today he will break Diella completely. He thinks that he will make her regret the pass down to her bones. Diella walks in wearing a red hood, her small steps controlled but tense. She recalls last week when she looks up at Derrick and asks if he really means what he said, that he does not care what happens as long as he gets paid. Derrick answers that she has probably noticed too, but her magic growth has already gotten on track. He says that she cannot use 1-star magic right away, but it will not take that long. He adds that the reason is simple: she was born with Duplain blood. Diella flinches at the mention of blood and demands to know why he is suddenly saying that. Derrick asks if he did not tell her before, then he brings up the School of the Wild and says that it is a school that focuses on self-study rather than passing things down. Diella bursts out, demanding to know why he is saying that kind of thing right now, her voice cracking with frustration. Her eyes tremble, and she forces herself to speak anyway. She says that she knows she is not that great of a student, but she still wants to keep learning magic from him. She says that she does not want anyone else as her teacher. Derrick stays silent for a moment, his back half turned, the wind tugging at his cloak. Then he tells her in advance that he does not know the etiquette or rules for nobles' magic spars, and he admits that he has never done one. He says that even so, he can teach her how to win in a fight, and he asks if she wants to win. A dark memory resurges around her, murmurs coil through the crowd like smoke. People whisper that it looks like Lady Diella does not have any magic after all, and they sneer that even that famous teacher gave up on her. Someone wonders how something like her could come out of Duplain, and another mutters that Duplain's past its prime, and that is all. Several voices complain that the little thing only knows how to cause trouble, and they speculate that the Grand Duke must have a lot on his mind. Others say that at least there is Lady Eislein, and one voice spits that his child is the one who will bring him down. Someone finishes by saying that it is better not to give birth to something like that. Diella hears it all anyway. Tears cling to her lashes, but her stare hardens as she looks Derrick in the eyes. She answers that he should make her win. Back to the present, Diella steps forward. Diella did not come there as Rhaeg's younger sister, much less as the youngest of House Duplain. She stood there only as Derrick's student, and a mage. The Duplain crest flutters over the estate. Lady Diella steps forward in a red hooded cloak, facing Rhaeg with sharp green eyes. The butler clears his throat and says that they will be applying the sparring rules used by the high-rank mages of the Ibelstein-Kelbram Salon. He adds that whichever side triggers General Pelham's protective magic circle first will be declared the loser. Rhaeg sets his jaw and says that they should begin. Derrick watches quietly and thinks about the pendant accessory, the General Pelham's protective magic circle, recognizing it as a safeguard that activates right before the wearer would take major damage, nullifying the opponent's spell. He thinks that this is how nobles fight, wasting expensive accessories on something as trivial as a spar, and he notes that the duration is 10 minutes. Judging from the mood that Rhaeg plans to end it sooner than that, Rhaeg raises his hand and chants, green rings of mana spiraling outward like slicing wind. Even as the pressure rolls across the terrace, he thinks that he has to send Diella back to the annex. Diella's cloak whips in the turbulence. She stands calmly until the attack reaches her before dodging to the side, and she starts running. Rhaeg's eyes harden as he watches her evade and he bristles, thinking that she has nerve. He swings his arm again, sending another surge to crush through, but Diella keeps moving, bracing and redirecting with raw, straightforward 1-star magic. Derrick studies her form and thinks that she handles 1-star magic with ease, but that she is still a complete beginner in real combat. He realizes that she is forcing the trajectory, just to make her attacks and blocks connect, and he warns himself that she will burn through mana fast if she keeps doing it. She plants her feet and forces her mana forward, throwing up a towering wall of ice. The green current slams into it and she darts aside, narrowly slipping through the gaps in the swirling flow as the wind magic curves after her. Rhaeg stares at the ice wall and judges it as nothing more than manifested power, not a real star-rank technique. He thinks that she cannot block his magic with a trick, then decides he will break through with firepower. He glares and challenges her to try blocking what comes next, gathering multiple green spell lights that whirl and swell like concentrated storms. As the pressure builds, Diela's breathing turns ragged, but she remembers Derrick's earlier words and the way he drilled them into her. That mercenaries fight differently from nobles, that they do not treat fair play as a virtue, that their only focus is victory. She recalls him warning that this is far from a typical noble duel, that even winning can earn criticism, but that she can still choose an ending where she wins. She remembers him asking if she is really fine with that. Diela clenches her shaking hands, lifts her chin, and answers that she is, without hesitation. Diela stands in her red hood and fixes her blue eyes forward. Green mana whips through the air in crescent blades, and the wind pressure rolls in like a storm. Diela drives herself low and runs, her cloak flaring as she slips past the edge of the cutting flow. The green arc carves into the floor with a violent hiss, gouging the boards and throwing splinters up where she was a moment ago. As she keeps moving, she recalls the lesson Derrick drilled into her, and she repeats to herself that among mercenaries there are people who keep winning even when there is a gap in strength. She reminds herself that those people do not duel, and they fight. She tells herself that fighting means controlling the battlefield by using the terrain and surroundings, and that they will use anything and everything available to seize victory. She forces herself to remember that she must even seize the very short moment when the opponent drops their guard. Rhaeg tightens his stance and drives another spell forward, confident enough to say that it is over. The next blast slams down with crushing force, and ice fractures under the impact as another wind slash comes at her from behind. The strike tears across the terrace and connects, sending dust and debris upward. Derrick watches calmly while their mother snaps into panic and shouts at Delyn to stop the spar immediately, insisting that Diela is hurt. The Grand Duke answers coldly and tells her to sit down, then says that it is not over yet. When she protests and insists that Diela was clearly struck by the attack, he cuts her off and says that she is wrong, because General Pelham's magic circle did not activate. The Grand Duke falls into silence, watching without blinking. Derrick sits below, still as stone, his red eyes steady on the terrace. The Duke watches him and thinks that he did not even blink, then wonders if he already expected Diela to grow to this extent. On the terrace, Rhaeg's expression hardens, as he thinks that she definitely should have been struck by that. He questions why the magic circle did not activate, and he searches for her with a sharp, unsettled glance, wondering where she went. A sudden crack splits the floor by his boot. Before he can shift his weight, a jagged surge of ice erupts upward from beneath him. The blow catches him off guard, ripping him off his feet as he grunts through the impact. He crashes down hard and skids across the terrace, his body twisting as the shock finally breaks across his face. Rhaeg clenches his teeth as cold sweat runs down his face, and he thinks that the attack came from below the platform. He turns his head toward the official standing at the edge and thinks that, by the Kelburn Salon's rules, leaving the platform should count as a loss. When nothing is declared, he lets out a bitter scoff in his head and thinks that they are really treating being below the platform as if it does not count as having left it. He grits his jaw and thinks that the nobles probably never even considered a petty trick like this being used in a magic spar between nobles. He strides across the fractured boards, then slows as he reaches a broken section and peers down. At the same instant, a sharp surge of ice erupts upward with a violent roar, forcing him to recoil as jagged blue spires spear through the air around him and splinters scatter across the terrace. He lands in a wide stance between the rising shards, cloak snapping in the wind, and his eyes dart across the battlefield. Rhaeg swallows hard and thinks that he cannot see her, and that landing an attack on her will be difficult. He immediately follows that with the realization that all she needs to do is land a single blow on him. He tightens his expression and thinks that this spar has no trace of noble etiquette at all, then calls out for Diela as he scans the floor again. His gaze drops to a gaping hole torn into the platform, and he leans toward it. Below, Diela crouches in the cavity amid dust and debris, her red hood framing a face that stays eerily calm as she looks up at him. Her eyes burn with a steady, controlled intensity, and Rhaeg's breath catches as recognition hits him. He thinks that he has seen that look somewhere before, and he recalls the same unusually calm gaze Derrick had when Rhaeg's older brother grabbed him by the collar. Rhaeg's expression darkens as he thinks that Diela could not have come up with this alone. His eyes flick toward the stands where Derrick sits with his arms crossed, unmoved. And rage bowls up in Rhaeg as he thinks that Derrick is scum and that this must have been his plan. Rhaeg grabs at his cloak's clasp, yanks it free, and flings the heavy fabric away so it spins through the air and drops beside the ice spires. He straightens, lifts his hand as if accepting the rules of this twisted exchange, and says that fine. He will play along, then declares that he will play along with this scheme of hers. The duel presses on. Rhaeg stands alone on what remains of the shattered platform, the stone cracked and splintered by his own magic when he tried to strike his opponent. Broken planks hang at odd angles. Dust drifts through the air. The arena no longer looks fit for nobles. From the balcony, the Duchess cries out in disbelief. She says that she cannot believe Diala would crawl into a filthy pit beneath the stage, calling it disgraceful and unladylike. Her voice trembles as she pleads with her husband to stop the duel at once. The Duke remains composed. He says that she should keep watching, since Diala has not violated any rules. His expression stays calm, thoughtful, and possible to read as his eyes follow the chaos below. Beneath the broken floorboards, Diala kneels in darkness. Shards of glowing ice hover faintly around her, casting cold light over the dirt, smudged planes of her face. Her eyes are wide, steady, burning with focus. In that stillness, something changes. For the first time, she sees it clearly, the flow of mana moving through the air like invisible currents made visible. Above ground, Rhaeg stiffens. A sharp jolt runs through him as he senses the shift in her presence. Surprise flashes across his face. Suddenly, jagged pillars of ice burst upward from below. He leaps back just in time, boots scraping across cracked stone as the spikes tear through the stage where he stood. He grits his teeth, realizing she is deliberately disrupting his casting whenever he tries to chant. He refuses to fall here. Sweat slides down his temple as his eyes dart across the ruined arena. He searches for anything, any advantage. Then he spots a tall flagpole at the edge of the platform. A reckless idea takes shape. Underground, Diala notices something else. The flow of mana from Rhaeg has stopped. She understands immediately that he is planning something. She steadies herself, preparing to strike the moment she senses his next chant begin. At the sidelines, the old butler watches anxiously. He murmurs the young master's name under his breath, worry etched into his lined face. Without warning, Rhaeg moves. He launches himself upward and scrambles up the flagpole with startling speed. As he climbs, he thinks that from this height and distance, she will not be able to interfere with his mana flow. But there is a problem. From such an unstable perch, chanting is impossible. He sees only one path to victory. He decides to pour all his remaining power into a single overwhelming attack, one strong enough to obliterate the entire platform without the need for a chant. Perched at the top, wind whipping around him, he unleashes it. A massive blast of magic roars downward. In the stands, Derrick watches the scene unfold, his expression cold and unimpressed. The magical bombardment slams into the stage. Stone cracks. Wood splinters. The pillar beneath shatters under the crushing force. The shockwave travels upward. The flagpole cannot withstand it. Its base fractures. The pole snaps violently, and Rhaeg is thrown into the air, his balance completely lost. A deafening explosion tears through the dueling grounds. Smoke and debris swallow the stage whole. The Duchess screams her son's name in horror as the blast consumes the arena. When the dust begins to settle, Rhaeg lands safely on the ground, bracing himself with one hand. He lifts his head sharply, eyes scanning through drifting smoke, searching for her. Then a figure bursts from the haze. Diala sprints across the ruined stage. Rhaeg reacts instantly. Mana gathers at his fingertips, condensing into a glowing blue arrow. He releases it, and the streak of light whistles toward her. Diala's eyes widen. She twists her body and thrusts out her hand. A surge of her own mana erupts outward to intercept the attack, but the strain is obvious. Shock flashes across her face. The effort nearly overwhelms her. Rhaeg wastes no time. Another arrow forms at his fingertips. Diala sees the projectile coming straight for her. She understands she cannot block this one. Instead of retreating, she changes tactics. She charges directly toward him. Rhaeg allows himself a brief, confident smile. He believes that if even one arrow connects, the duel is his. He underestimates her speed. Before he can react, Diala closes the gap and drives a powerful kick across his chest. The blow snaps his head sideways. He stumbles back in shock. Blood trickles from Diala's lip as she grits her teeth. Rhaeg drops to one knee, clutching his chest and gasping, stunned by the unexpected physical strike. While he struggles to regain balance, Diala plants one hand on the ground and scoops up a handful of dirt and sand from the wreckage. Seeing her chance, she flings it straight into his eyes. In a move unheard of in noble duels, grit and dust scatter across his face. Rhaeg recoils, cursing as he tries to wipe the debris from his eyes. For a few critical seconds, he is blinded. Diala uses that moment to retreat to a safer distance. When his vision clears, realization dawns. If she has resorted to physical blows and throwing sand, then she must be out of mana. He cannot believe she is willing to fight like this. She continues to struggle even when defeat seems inevitable. As he rises slowly to his feet, understanding settles over him. This duel was never just about winning for her, it was about proving her worth. A new resolve forms in his eyes. He decides that he will honor her determination. He will meet her not as a superior mage, but as her brother, and he will give everything he has. The sun shines over the ruined courtyard, casting long shadows across broken stone. Diala stands across from him exhausted. She clutches her head. Her eyes burn with frustration. She has reached her limit. A drop of blood slides down her chin. Her thoughts drift back to a memory from long ago. A voice echoes in her mind, telling her to think of magic as painting with a brush. The memory unfolds. Mana is the paint, the voice explains. The spell is the brush. You do not force it. You gather the paint scattered around you and use it to create a picture. Under a quiet, star-filled sky, Derrick demonstrates. Blue mana swirls gracefully at his command. He turns to her and says that this act of creation is magic. The younger Diala looks up at him, and his words open a new world before her. The peaceful memory of that night under the stars fills her with renewed purpose. Back in the present, Diela closes her eyes. A faint smile touches her lips. She recalls the lesson. Mana is the paint. The spell is the brush. A soft blue aura begins to surround her. She ignores the rigid chanting she was forced to memorize. Instead, she reaches out with her will alone. The light around her intensifies. She feels it clearly now, the raw mana in the air responding, swirling, gathering at her fingertips. She opens her eyes. Her gaze is sharp. With this paint, she decides she will create. In a brilliant flash, the mana coalesces. A perfect, shimmering ice spear materializes beside her, suspended within a complex magic circle. She has done it. That is magic. The butler stares in disbelief. His jaw slack, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. The Duchess turns to her husband, her voice shaking. She says that Diela, the daughter they believe to be a failure, is using one-star magic. Raig watches with concern. He says her name under his breath, worried that she might lose control and cause a disastrous accident with such a spell. But Diela stands steady. Her hands do not tremble as she channels the immense power of the ice spear. Seeing the threat, Raig gathers his own mana without hesitation. He charges forward, convinced that the outcome will not change. Even with one-star magic, he believes he remains one step ahead. He is determined to strike before she can. Diela does not retreat. She meets his charge with unwavering eyes. Raig unleashes a volley of glowing magic arrows, aiming to overwhelm her before she releases her spear. Diela releases her ice spear. The two forces collide midair. Magic crashes against magic. A blinding explosion erupts, swallowing the dueling ground in pure, violent energy. The Duchess screams Diela's name, her face pale with terror. When the smoke begins to thin, something extraordinary appears at the center of the impact. A glowing sphere shimmering with controlled power. Having performed its role as an absurdly powerful shield, Raig exhales shakily, drained from the tremendous energy he has spent. Across from him, Diela breathes heavily. Bruised and battered, Derrick watches, his intense gaze fixed on the aftermath of the battle, watching everything in silence. 1 year ago, chicks chirped beneath the trees, and birds fluttered past the manor windows in the soft morning light. The bearded duke arrived with several attendants. The butler stepped forward and said that a letter had come from House Belmiard that morning, likely regarding the recent incident. He asked how it should be handled. Through the window, the duke saw Diela sitting alone in the light, staring ahead without expression, and he fell silent. The protective circle had activated. Derrick lowered his eyes and Diela admitted to herself that he had lost. Diela's composure collapsed. She clutched her head and sobbed openly on the ruined boards. Her mother erupted again, calling the duel vulgar and filthy, about that so-called master and the disgraceful methods he had taught. A memory surfaced in the duke's mind. A young soldier stepping forward and introducing himself as Raymond Oswald Duplain, saying that it was an honor to serve under the duke's command. Another man had remarked that the soldier's eyes resembled his father's, filled with ambition. Raymond had answered with gratitude. The memory faded. In the present, the duke studied Diela and thought that her gaze had sharpened. Servants rushed onto the platform. One asked if Lady Diela was all right. Another insisted she receive treatment at once. She pushed them away and approached her brother, then she bowed without saying a word. Raig acted awkwardly and said that she had done well. Diela remained hunched, wiping tears from her cheeks. Several maids gathered around her and offered to escort her inside. She pulled away and walked off despite their concern. In the quiet garden, Derrick sat alone on a bench by the wall, his red eyes calm. Diela stopped before him, trembling. She said that she had lost and added that she was sorry. Derrick looked up and said that it was all right. He added that he was fine as well and told her to overcome this frustration and grow stronger. Her restraint broke. She let out a raw scream that tore from her chest. A maid cried out in alarm. Her mother rushed in, shouting Diela's name. She dropped to her knees, seized her daughter's arms, and said that her poor child had suffered enough. Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace and said that everything was all right now. She urged her to receive treatment immediately. Diela, shaking and tear-streaked, said that she understood. The maids led her away. Her mother remained behind, wiping her eyes. Derrick turned to leave. Diela's mother strode toward him and exploded in anger. She called him vulgar and demanded whether he understood what he had done. She said that teaching a one-star spell was nothing impressive. Derrick stayed silent. She slapped him and accused him of staining a noble lily with cheap tricks and forcing disgrace upon the Grand Ducal House's daughter. She insisted that he could never understand noble values and dignity. Diela's father approached and told her to look at the situation properly. He stated that what happened was not even a true magic duel. When she continued to protest, he fixed her with a sharp slap and asked whether she truly did not see who was behaving most disgracefully. She recoiled and asked why, insisting that Derrick was only a commoner. The Duke answered coldly that even if he was a commoner, he was their daughter's teacher, and he asked what kind of parent would treat a teacher that way. The white-haired boy lowered his head in silence. The Duke asked him to forgive her, explaining that every parent loves their child in their own way. The boy said that it was fine. The Duke invited him to the reception room to speak privately. His wife could only watch in frustration. Inside his office, the Duke praised him, saying that he had raised Diela well and that, as master of the estate, he should grant a reward. He explained that the highest spell legally permitted to a commoner was 3-star magic and directly asked whether he desired it. The boy realized that the Duke had seen through him. even sensing an ambition he had barely admitted to himself. He thought that opportunities must be seized when they appear. He answered that he wanted it. The Duke acknowledged this and said that although he had taught Diela one star spell effectively, that level was not enough for survival in Ebelstein's high society. Derrick replies that there are many in Duplain who could guide Lady Diela. Now that she grasped the basics, she'll grow quickly. The Duke argues that what she needed was not merely an instructor, but a master. As ink drips from a pen onto parchment, the man continues, saying that the boy harbors an ambition a commoner is not even allowed to dream of. Derrick notes that the Grand Duke has not spoken with him much. The Duke asks if he understands how insulting such ambition would feel to lofty nobles, which is why he chooses to overlook it this time. The fact that the Duke knows that he aims to go beyond 3-star magic is what truly frightens Derrick. The boy listens in silence as the man adds that if he holds such intentions, he cannot remain in a place like this for long, and asks if he is already prepared to leave. The boy answers calmly that yes, that is correct. The man says that he does not fail to see his ambition, but insists that he must teach Diela a little longer. Once again, he repeats that the highest realm permitted to a commoner is a 3-star spell, and asks if he desires it. The boy meets his gaze without hesitation and says that yes, he wants it. Derrick slips into the library's warm light and pulls a thick, leather-bound tome from a tall shelf. Dust drifts as he opens it, his gloved finger tracing dense writing and intricate magic circles stamped across the pages. He falls silent, then thinks that it is amazing. He reflects that many people spend their entire lives trying to obtain even a single 2-star spellbook, yet the shelves here are filled with 3-star spellbooks. He concludes that with this, he has every reason to stay in this mansion longer, then adds that Pelane would cause an uproar if she found out. Elsewhere in the estate, the commotion carries faintly, and time passes under a clear sky where birds wheel overhead. Diela appears outside, newly bandaged and standing with forced pride. She lets out a small sound of satisfaction and declares that she is a 1-star mage now. Derrick answers calmly that since she did cast a 1-star spell once, she can be called a 1-star mage. Diela goes quiet, then protests that this is all he has to say, and complains that his student achieved something and he does not even look happy. He insists that it was not an early achievement, as if that is what makes it disappointing. She exhales as though tired of arguing and remarks that he is not easy. Derrick observes that she seems to have recovered quite a lot in 3 days. Diela stiffens when he brings up the past when she cried a lot back then. She immediately denies it, insisting it was only dust, just a little dust that got in her eyes. She adds that her father should have told her earlier, admitting she thought he was about to be kicked out. Derrick shifts the topic and asks if they should start the lesson. He tells her that since she is growing quickly, she will learn other 1-star spells soon. Diela blinks, confused, and asks what he means by quick. Derrick explains that her growth has only been this fast since her mana awakened, and that casting even a 1-star spell is rare. He continues, as if reminding her of something he said before, and she tries to follow along. Diela eagerly suggests what they should do first, listing spells she wants. Mana Arrow because it looked convenient without chanting. Wind Blade because her brother Raig used it, and it looked strong, and Ice Spear because it seemed nice. She even muses that if she improves a bit more, she could probably hit her brother Raig too. Derrick cuts through her excitement and states that they will practice mana manifestation. Diela blurts out why, pointing out that she thought they were learning 1-star spells. Derrick says there are many reasons, but in the end the fundamentals are the most important, and he starts to simplify it by saying that ultimately mana. Diela gives in with reluctant resolve and says they should do it, adding that if he says so, then that is that. Yet her face betrays her disappointment as she admits she got excited for nothing, thinking she would learn 1-star spells right away. She catches Derrick watching her, and asks why he is looking at her like that, wondering if there is something on her face. Derrick tells her there is nothing, and admits he is just surprised she is listening so obediently. Diela flares up, demanding what kind of person he thinks she is, and insists that she respected what he said from the beginning. Derrick repeats her words under his breath, lingering on the phrase from the beginning, and his mind flashes back to her grinning as she dumped dirty water over his head. Twice. Back in the present, he reminds her that she poured dirty water on his head twice. Diela freezes, then asks if he still remembers that, and Derrick answers flatly that it is hard to forget. Diela dashes across the terrace, laughing wildly that the weather is nice. Trying to change the subject, she says that mana manifestation sounds fun and that she wants to practice already. He watches her excitement and smiles wryly. Night settles over the estate beneath a bright moon. Out on the grass, Diela lies sprawled on her back, chest heaving as she pants and huffs, sweat and scuffs marking how hard she pushed herself. Standing above her in the cool night air, the teacher remarks that it sounds like she will get busy soon. Diela keeps catching her breath, then shifts up while the teacher lowers himself closer, and she says that she heard it too. Rubbing her head in frustration, Diela mutters that it is whatever, then admits that starting next week she will have etiquette classes as well. The teacher asks if that is a good thing, explaining that since she learned a 1-star spell, she will now receive true noble education. Diela challenges that idea, listing basic noble etiquette, foreign languages, geography, history, botany, piano, and sewing, and she says that she does not understand why she has to learn all of that. Looking up with wary disbelief, she wonders how Sister Iseline endured it. The teacher states that this is why Iceline is called the flower of Duplin, and he adds that she is the center of Ebelstane society. Delilah, still fixated on what she wants, says that she only wants to study magic. The teacher tells her to do so, then says that the Grand Duke hired him, so they have plenty of leeway. She wonders whether there truly is that much time. He asks who would fire him now. Delilah answers that of course there is someone out to get him, pointing out that her father acknowledged him, but her mother will not leave it alone. With her gaze turning serious, Derrick asks why the madam wants to drive him out. She explains that learning from him distances her from noble dignity, and she says that madam fears she will become like a mercenary. She adds that even the duel was far from the dignity nobles pursue. The teacher falls silent, eyes lowered, then says that the solution is simple. He addresses her as Lady Delilah and says that silencing madam is not actually that difficult, instructing her to remove madam's justification. Delilah blinks, caught off guard, and lets out a confused sound as the meaning sinks in. The next day, the grand buildings stand under a bright sky while footsteps echo inside. Madam walks the corridor with her hands folded, posture stiff, servants moving in the background as she advances with measured steps. In her thoughts, she bristles that it is unbelievable Delilah met such a dreadful teacher, and she laments that her poor child has suffered. Her mind flashes through grim images of that teacher's influence, his ruthless grin, his presence framed like a fighter rather than a tutor, while a harsh warning rings out that Delilah must watch carefully, because this is the mercenary way, followed by Delilah answering that she understands as his student. Another vision overlays it, Delilah striding and boldly carrying a boar like a savage, and declaring that this is the famed Ebelstane High Society, while people shriek her full name in disgust and fear. The pressure builds until Madam clutches her head and groans that it hurts, then thinks bitterly about what a lowborn could possibly teach Delilah. Her resolve hardens as she insists to herself that even if her husband approves, she is the lady of this house. Pressing her fingers to her temple, she thinks that she must find a way. A voice calls out to her and Delilah steps forward, addressing her mother. Madam turns with a softened smile and calls Delilah back warmly, speaking as if nothing is wrong. With a practiced tenderness, she says that even if people call Delilah immature, this mother likes it when she smiles in her arms. Then she falters mid-expression, the warmth slipping as uncertainty flashes across her face. Delilah approaches in a neat blue dress, poised and composed, and asks whether her mother rested well last night. Madam startles, a bead of sweat forming as she blurts a confused response. Delilah meets her mother with a gentle smile and says that she could not leave her room because she was treating her injuries, so she regrets missing the chance to talk. She adds that there are many things she wants to share, but she explains that she has piano lessons this morning. Her mother looks taken aback and answers that she understands. Delilah places a hand over her chest and says that she will go first since she is busy with her classes. Her mother hurriedly calls after her, asking if the etiquette classes have not started yet and saying that they begin next week. Delilah answers that this is correct. With a composed expression, Delilah says that thanks to her mother's concern, she is truly looking forward to those classes. Her mother falters, then tells her to hurry because she will be late. As she walks away, a maid is so shocked by Delilah's attitude that she drops what she was carrying. Acting unlike herself, Delilah walks up to the maid and asks if she is hurt. She urges her not to overexert herself. The brown-haired maid freezes, sweating as she forces out a stuttering acknowledgement and addresses Delilah properly. Nearby, Delilah continues on, her blue skirt swaying as she walks away from the gathering. Behind her, Delilah's mother remains still, watching from where she stands, her gaze lingering as the servants and the maid look on in shock while Delilah leaves the courtyard. Beyond the northern wall of Ebelstane lies the district where the nobility gathers. Recently, Iceline's smile has returned. Until the last gathering she had looked so troubled that it caused real concern. Iceline admits that it was more obvious than she intended. She explains that she never meant to worry anyone, but most of the matters that had been weighing on her have now been resolved, and she feels far more at ease. The one speaking is Alent, the second daughter of Count Bulmildi. She says that she had been extremely worried after hearing that Iceline often have ventured outside the noble district to help others. Iceline thanks her for the concern. She explains that her recent business was actually due to personally searching for a magic tutor for her younger sister, Delilah. At this, Alent cannot hide her surprise. She remarks that anyone worthy of being sought out personally by Iceline must be an extraordinary mage. Denise, the second daughter of the Bertus family, asks whether Iceline is referring to her sister, Miss Delilah. Iceline confirms that she is. She says that she saw Delilah at the estate not long ago and was stunned by the transformation. She explains that Delilah now carries herself like a refined young lady, so different from before that it feels as if she has become another person entirely. She adds that she has heard Delilah can now even cast one-star magic, and that her poise is so impeccable it makes Iceline feel she must work twice as hard herself. Denise grows curious. She points out that the Dupreen family had never shared much about Delilah before and asks whether Iceline has found a truly remarkable magic tutor. Asline says that she has. She explains that although the tutor's background is not particularly distinguished, his ability to teach is exceptional. She states that personally negotiating with the Belgian mercenary corps to secure him was absolutely worth it. The word mercenary strikes both Denise and Alent with visible shock, Alent suddenly remembers that the current head chef of the Bomalda household had once been driven out of the Dupreen estate by Diala. Rumor has it that the reason was nothing more than serving soup that was too hot. That former little tyrant has now not only reformed but has also become a one-star mage. In that instant, Alent feels an intense curiosity about the magic tutor Iceline mentioned. Alent asks Iceline to reveal the tutor's name. She says that if he is Diala's teacher, he is certain to become well known in the future, and she would like to know his name in advance. Iceline replies that his name is Derrick. Meanwhile, Diala informs her mother that Derrick has been teaching her a small portion of noble etiquette. She has still learned quite a bit. She admits that relying solely on self-study would have been far too difficult. The Duchess remarks that it is impressive she even attempted to teach herself noble etiquette. Diala clarifies that while part of it was self-taught, most of what she knows was learned through Derrick's instruction and lessons. Her mother ignores Derrick's contributions and asked whether she encountered difficulties during that process of what she insists is her daughter's self-study. Diala answers that nearly everything was difficult, and she says again that without Derrick's guidance she would never have reached his current level. Hearing this, Miliera finds her thoughts irritated as her daughter won't shut up about Derrick. She cannot accept that her precious daughter now mentions that commoner constantly. She does not know what Derrick has done to her daughter, but she knows she cannot allow things to continue like this. She can already imagine how events might unfold. Others begin commenting on Diala's recent changes. They say that she has grown kinder even toward commoners and much gentler in temperament. They observe that she seems to be in exceptionally good spirits. In just a few weeks, the transformation is astonishing. The butler remarks that such elegance was once seen only in Iceline, yet now Diala is becoming a true lady. They conclude that she finally carries herself like a noble, and that this is largely thanks to Mr. Derrick. Miliera silently swears that she will put an end to this influence. Time passes quickly. Derrick studies 3-star magic alone. Though he possesses remarkable talent, he encounters a serious obstacle this time. It feels as though he stands before an invisible threshold separating him from becoming a true 3-star mage. He realizes that the books he has been reading summarize magic according to the Orthodox faction, but as a practitioner of the Wild faction, he needs real combat experience to advance. At that moment, he hears Reg's voice behind him. He apologizes, asking whether he has interrupted his training. He says that it is no problem and asks what has brought him here. Reg explains that it concerns Diala and that he has something he wishes to discuss. Then he notices the book in his hands and asks whether it is a 3-star magic tome. Derrick confirms that it was lent to him by the Grand Duke. Hearing that his father gave Derrick the book leaves Reg visibly stunned. Derrick says that even if he cannot yet reach that level, studying ahead of time cannot hurt. Reg suddenly recalls that when he once wanted to challenge Derrick, his father stopped him. The memory makes him break into a cold sweat. He comments that he truly is remarkable. Derrick asks what matter regarding Miss Diala brought him here. Reg hesitates and says that he is unsure how to phrase it. He asks whether he knows what teenage girls usually like. From his awkward expression, it is clear he intends to apologize to Diala. He suggests embroidery or perhaps making a doll that resembles Diala and asks whether such a gift would be appreciated. In that instant, Derrick remembers the doll Valerian once made. He immediately rejects the idea with a serious expression, stating that such a gift would absolutely not be appropriate. Reg admits that he had thought the same and clarifies that he had not truly planned to make it himself. After reconsidering, he agrees that it would not be suitable and suggests they head back. As they walk toward the estate, Reg gradually calms down. He says that he is sincerely grateful. He explains that the atmosphere at home has improved greatly. He notes that his brother Valerian is focusing on managing the territory, and although their father does not show it openly, he appears satisfied. Derrick responds that the Grand Duke's thoughts are difficult to read, something everyone in the estate likely understands. Reg reflects that he must accept certain realities. He says that people can change, especially children at that age. He wonders whether he simply failed to notice before or deliberately avoided acknowledging it. Since Diala has changed, he says he also wants to try changing himself. He states that all of this is thanks to Derrick and expresses his heartfelt gratitude. Derrick lowers his head quietly in response. After a brief pause, he mentions that Diala's magic seems to be used in a slightly different way and asks whether Reg has noticed the distinction. Reg says that to him. It feels almost like painting. Derrick suddenly realizes something. Nobles are nobles, after all. In their perception of magical power, there exists a natural gap between them and commoners that cannot easily be bridged. He explains that Diala is using the Wild faction's method of manipulating magic. Reg says that he has heard a little about the Wild faction before. Derrick speculates that once Diala reaches a certain level, she may be able to continue her research independently, and that at that stage, a teacher's guidance might actually become an obstacle to her growth. He replies that once someone reaches a certain level, there will always come a day when they see the light. Before anyone realizes it, 2 months have passed since Diala began to change. One day, Diala notices the flowers and asks how it got there. The maid explains that she saw the flowers blooming so beautifully that she wanted to tuck one into her hair, so she brought them along. Diala comments that the fragrance is lovely and says it feels as though spring has lingered throughout these past months. She now uses 1-star magic with complete ease. She has also grown much closer to the servants. Looking back, she admits she missed far too much before. She says that all of it is thanks to Derrick. The maid observes that she seems to be in unusually high spirits and realizes it must be the day of her magic lesson. Dyla wonders whether she truly looks that happy and insists the flower must be placed carefully so it looks its best. She keeps one blossom for herself, explaining that she plans to give it to Derrick. Not long afterward, that very flower drops heavily to the ground. The girl who had been brimming with anticipation is struck by sudden news. Tears quickly fill her eyes. She asks what it means. Valerian, who oversees the territory's affairs, confirms that what she heard is true. Derrick explains calmly that given Dyla's current level, he no longer has anything left to teach her. He compares it to the cycle of the seasons, saying there is no endless winter, and therefore no eternal spring. Her magic lessons are ending. Derrick believes the Grand Duke has already realized that Dyla belongs to the wild faction and possesses a strong personal style. He says that if he continues guiding her, he might end up clipping her wings instead of helping her soar. The Grand Duke acknowledges this and states that there is now no reason to keep Derrick at the estate. Derrick agrees. After a brief silence, the Grand Duke rises from his seat. He admits that many things have changed thanks to Derrick. He says that because of him, his daughter was able to grow. He confesses that he focused so heavily on managing the territory that he failed, in some ways, as a father. Now he says he can finally feel at ease. He asks when Derrick intends to depart. Derrick explains that Miss Iceline will soon visit the estate before returning to Ebelstein, and he plans to leave in her carriage at that time. The Grand Duke nods and requests the return of the library key. Derrick replies that he will return the magic books he is currently reading and hand the key back through the steward. The Grand Duke tells him there is no need for such formality and asks for the key now. Derrick immediately understands. His eyes shift to the 3-star magic book hanging at his waist. When the Grand Duke dismisses him, it is clear that the book is a gift. Neither of them says it aloud. Derrick bows deeply and leaves the study. In the corridor outside, Dyla has been waiting in silence. Derrick has no idea how long she has stood there. Dyla says that he appeared suddenly in her life and now plans to leave just as suddenly. Derrick asks what he can possibly do. Dyla admits she knows he will not change his decision, but she still has to ask whether he truly must leave, whether staying is impossible. Hearing the urgency in her voice, Derrick explains that he will return to life as a mercenary and continue pursuing magic. He says that if Dyla keeps strengthening herself, then when she debuts in Ebelstein's social circles, they will surely meet again. By then, he may have advanced further and be able to teach her something new. Dyla complains that he is frustrating and always leaves her speechless. That night, she dreams the nightmare she had not seen since Derrick first entered her life. The harsh whispers and malicious laughter return. Even though she is now a 1-star mage, even though she carries herself like a proper noble lady, she feels as helpless as before he arrived. She jolts awake, drenched in sweat. Moonlight slips through the curtains into the darkened room. She realizes it was only a dream and struggles to steady her breathing. A maid rushes in after hearing her scream and anxiously asks whether she is hurt. At the sight of the maid, a dangerous thought flashes through Dyla's mind. Derrick is leaving because there is no reason for him to stay. But if she were to turn everything upside down again, like before, perhaps that reason would return. She remembers clearly that Derrick once told her that the choice has always been in her hands. The maid, frightened by Dyla's expression, asks again whether she feels unwell. Dyla hesitates. If she makes a scene now, Derrick might stay. In the end, she says she is fine. She realizes that throwing a tantrum would only deny everything Derrick has done for her. Even if he leaves, she cannot let his efforts become meaningless. Time moves quickly and the day of departure arrives. At the entrance to Ebelstein, Iceline asks whether they should disembark there or continue to the commercial district, that the commercial district will be more convenient. Derrick expresses gratitude for all the care he has received. Iceline suggests they exchange final farewells as they are about to leave. Derrick turns back. Unlike the day he first arrived, this time all the younger members of the Dupreen family have come to see him off. Valerian asks whether he is truly leaving now. Derrick confirms that he must return to where he belongs. Reg remarks that life at the estate could not have been easy and thanks him for his hard work. He adds that if he ever needs assistance, he should reach out, and they will help however they can. Derrick expresses sincere thanks. They nod to one another, and he bows in return. When he lifts his head, his gaze finds the only person who has not spoken. Dyla raises her chin slightly and stares at him with forced pride. She demands to know why he is looking at her that way and asks whether he expects her to cry and beg him to stay. She insists she is no longer a child. Derrick says that it was an honor to teach her. He adds that although she may not be able to openly declare him as her teacher, he hopes she will at least remember the magic he taught her. Dyla immediately rejects that notion. She declares that she fully intends to proclaim him as her teacher openly, and says that even if he wishes for a quiet life, that may no longer be possible. After all, he is the teacher of the remarkable Miss Dyla. She expects a response, but Derrick simply watches her in silence. That silence makes her chest tighten even more. She tells him not to get injured working as a mercenary. He replies that he will be fine and urges her instead to take care of herself. She insists there is nothing to worry about. She says she is already an adult now and can take care of herself. At that moment, an old memory surfaces in Derrick's mind. He once said those same words when Cardia left him. Back then, Cardia did not look relieved. Instead, she held him tightly, her expression even more worried than before, and whispered a short sentence in his ear. At the time, he could not understand it. Now, years later, standing before his own disciple as she declares herself grown, Derrick finally understands. She is still so young. The road ahead is long, the world is filled with unseen currents of magic, and life will bring confusion and hardship. On the waves of that uncertain future, the small figure claiming adulthood looks painfully fragile. So Derrick repeats the words once given to him. He tells Dyla that there is no need for her to become an adult so soon. Her pupils widen. She bites her lip, struggling to suppress her emotions, but tears spill over anyway. Her eyes redden as she blinks quietly. Realizing time is short, she stops pretending. She says goodbye to Derrick. Tears stream down her face, yet she smiles and waves farewell to her teacher. She will soon step into Ibelstein's social world, so Derrick tells her they will meet again there. He addresses her once more, calling her Miss. Not long afterward, the carriage rolled to a stop in the commercial district of Ibelstein. When Derrick pushed open the tavern door, he was greeted by a chaotic sight. A blonde girl was in the middle of beating up a chubby boy. The girl immediately recognized him and exclaimed that Derrick had finally returned. Derrick did not answer with words. He simply smiled faintly. He was home. With Dyla's magic lessons concluded, Derrick had returned to his homeland. The bartender set a mug down in front of him and remarked that while it could not compare to the tea served in noble estates, it was his favorite honey wine. Since it was meant to welcome him back, the speaker insisted on paying. Derrick offered his thanks. The blonde girl squinted at him and asked whether he had always been this pale. She remarked that after spending time among nobles, he seemed to have grown even worse somehow. She demanded to know how Derrick had managed to make nobles listen to him. She pressed him to explain what really happened. Derrick brushed it off, saying it was just work and nothing worth discussing. She accused him of acting like a noble and insisted something must have happened. The tavern master finally told Pelline to stop pestering him. She complained that she had nearly worked herself to death while Derrick was gone, taking on all the missions alone. The owner added that thanks to that arrangement, Derrick must have earned a fortune from noble payments. He asked whether he had at least settled the bill generously. Derrick replied that rather than getting money, he had gained something far more important. With that, he placed the magic book he had received from the Grand Duke on the table in front of them. The two stared at it in disbelief and asked whether it was a 2-star magic book. They were stunned that nobles would hand over something so valuable. Derrick corrected them. It was not 2-star. It was 3-star. The owner immediately accused him of stealing it and warned that if he were caught, he would lose his head. Pelline declared that if stealing meant getting a 3-star book, she would happily try it too and asked where Derrick had pulled it off. Derrick firmly denied stealing anything and stated that the Grand Duke had given it to him as a gift. They scoffed at the idea that a noble would hand such a treasure to a commoner and accused Derrick of picking up aristocratic habits, including boosting. It took him quite some time to convince them that the book truly was a gift. Once that was settled, Derrick asked whether any new commissions had come in. The owner stared at him and asked whether he was planning to accept a mission after only one day back. Derrick replied that a simple extermination job would be best started sooner rather than later. After resting in the comfort of a noble estate for too long, he said he felt slightly dull. He told him not to worry. In their line of work, mages were always in short supply. Derrick asked him to arrange something as soon as possible, preferably for the next day. The following morning, under the captain's arrangements, Derrick and Pelline set out to clear magical beasts. During Derrick's absence, Pelline had struggled handling those missions alone as an archer, facing more than a few dangerous moments. Now that Derrick had returned, she no longer had to worry about lacking firepower. They completed several commissions in succession. Exhausted from the workload, Pelline fell asleep early each night. Derrick, however, continued as usual. He would find a quiet corner and practice 3-star magic. After so much real combat, his understanding of 3-star magic had deepened considerably. Unlike before, when it felt distant and intangible, he now felt as though he had truly reached its threshold. Still, that threshold remained high. Even so, Derrick kept pushing himself. He knew talent alone meant nothing without effort. Time slipped by quietly. By the time Derrick could wield 2-star magic with confidence, early winter had arrived in Ibelstein. One day, he and Pelline returned from a mission shivering. Pelline complained that the cold was unbearable and asked how the weather could turn so bitter so suddenly. The captain chuckled and commented that youth was impressive, since they had gone all the way to the Kent Mountains in such weather. Pelline grumbled that they had not known it would be that harsh and asked to warm up inside before leaving again. The captain handed them 2 hot towels. They wiped the blood from their faces and thanked him. Pelline declared that she had barely survived. The captain told them to rest well the next day. Then he added that there was a commission perfectly suited for Derrick. Derrick asked what kind of commission. The captain described it as simple and well-paid though slightly troublesome. The task had originally gone to the Rohair Mercenary Corps on West Street but had been declined. The request came from the household of Count Bameldi. They were seeking a commoner capable of magic to assist in sparring practice. In simpler terms, they needed a sandbag. As long as Derrick endured a few spells, he would receive generous compensation. Derrick did not know that the one who issued the request was Alent, an acquaintance of Iceline. On the other side, Alent asked who her sparring partner would be that day. The man explained that in order to practice her new offensive magic, he had specifically recruited a commoner opponent. She questioned whether she had come all the way south from the north just to bully commoners with magic. He replied that practical training required realism. He added that proper compensation had been promised, so she could cast freely. She finally agrees to fulfill her duty as a noble to beat the shit out of a commoner. Her teacher reminded her that this was not mere bullying. The recruited opponent was a 1-star mage, so he would not be completely defenseless. Alent pointed out that she was on the verge of becoming a 2-star mage and remarked that the gap between 1-star and 2-star was vast. Her teacher responded that if she respected her opponent, she should fight with full strength, as that was proper etiquette on a training stage. Soon, under her teacher's guidance, Alent met her opponent. She was surprised by how young he looked, and asked whether he was truly her sparring partner for the day. Derrick stood, bowed politely, and introduced himself. At the sound of his name, Alent felt a strange sense of familiarity, as though she had heard it before. They were urged onto the training platform. Alent asked whether he understood the basic etiquette of magical sparring. Derrick replied that he had heard of it but only knew the fundamentals. Alent told him to resist as best he could and promised to end it quickly. In truth, she had no desire to torment someone weaker, so she planned to cast a shockwave and knock him off the stage at once. Derrick then asked what she meant by resisting and to what extent she expected him to do so. Alent stared at him, baffled by the question. Derrick clarified that he wished to know how far he should go resisting in order to be worthy of her training. Her teacher shook his head helplessly at Derrick's phrasing. Alent, however, let out a short laugh and asked whether he was deliberately trying to amuse her. She reminded him that she had told him to resist with all his strength. Derrick replied that he understood and would follow her command. In the next instant, magic began to bloom in his hand.